And the reason I wanted to get you on the show was because of...
Oh, here it goes. Here it goes.
How different our views are on certain things.
Mm-hmm. But here it goes. Here it goes.
I definitely... Everybody, welcome to another episode of West Coast Street Knowledge. I'm your host, Gail, a.k.a. the American Cholo. Got the co-host in the house serving himself some Coca-Cola.
What's cracking, you guys?
And we got a man in the house that really, in our form, needs zero introduction. He's one of the original founders out here of all this YouTube stuff. Mr. Alonso, how you doing, brother?
Oh, man, I'm doing good. West Coast Street Knowledge now? Is that what we're calling it?
That's what it's been. It's just we don't promote it.
Oh, okay.
That's what it's been, but everybody pretty much calls it
American Cholo.
I like the American Cholo, though.
It's not right. I don't know where it came on West Coast.
So it's West Coast Street Knowledge with American Cholo. How about that?
Yeah, well, something like that. Right now, there's a question that I wanted to ask you. I know a lot of people have asked you, and you touched on it a little bit. What's up with the Gangster Chronicles? Let's jump into that.
I know, huh? Man, I'm confused myself. I really don't know what happened. I was doing the show. I was hosting the show. I was coming up with the show ideas. I was outlining every episode. I was writing up a script. I was doing everything on that show. COVID hit and things changed. And it's confusing. I was just thinking about this a couple days ago, and as time passes and as things start to occur, more information is coming to light. And I just think ultimately the guy that kind of put the show together, he got a little taste of hosting when COVID hit through the Zoom, and he got that bug. He got bit by that bug, and he said, "Oh, I like this hosting.
I don't need nobody.
I like this hosting, and this is kind of interesting." And I think he said, "Well, I'm going to have to get rid of somebody." And I think that's really what it boiled down to, is getting rid of someone so that he could have a seat. Because what I didn't know, which came to light more recently, he had a deal. He was trying to get a deal, which ultimately he has a deal with Charlemagne and iHeart. And of course, if you have a seat on the show, that's another check for you. So I really don't know, man. All I could just say is that, he wanted to host. You see him hosting it now. And I don't know if you've been keeping up with people's complaints and people's reactions, but no one likes him hosting the show. And there was even an episode where he said, I'm going to step back. But did he step back? Nah, he's one of the hosts now. So, I'm confused. COVID hit and it kind of messed up a lot of things for a lot of people. But COVID really kind of brought the original Gangster Chronicles to an end.
And when the Gangster Chronicles originally began, was it with you, the original, or was it with James? And then you guys kind of got together?
What happened was they did the first 2 episodes. It was James McDonald from Compton and Reggie Wright Jr. from Compton. It was just them two. And then they would have a guest. I think they had Bosco as a guest on episode 2. I'm not sure what they did on episode 1. Then I get a call to come on episode 3. It was sort of like auditioning me to see whether or not I could command the mic and, facilitate a show. And as soon as episode 3 was over, he was like, "Hey, I want you to host this." And then episode 4 is where the format changed. I came in with scripts. I came in with show ideas. I came in with what we're going to talk about, because you really just can't go in there and just wing it. You got to have a little bit of structure. So ever since episode 4, that's really when the Gangster Chronicles was born. And, I did almost an entire year. I did 50 episodes.
No, it was a great show. And that's the sad part. The chemistry between you and the 2 other guys, it was beautiful, brother. So I don't see how they got there. And I saw him put some new co-hosts on them. So I said, once I saw that co-host, I said, Alonso's not coming back. And that's a shame, because it has the title of Gangster Chronicles, but without Alonso, it's not the Gangster Chronicles. But
well, I can tell you that I spoke to James McDonald, and he asked me he said to come back. And I said, well, I don't think I'm wanted. And he said, you need to call him. And I said, well, I'm not calling a dude that clearly doesn't want me there. He wasn't going to call me. I wasn't going to call him. But James McDonald didn't abandoned me. He, up to the very end, was like, he wanted me. He wanted me more than anybody else. But I said, I'm not doing it. I'm not calling this dude up. I don't really trust this guy anymore. I feel like I got backstabbed. I really feel like I got backstabbed. And I'm sure he thinks it's no big deal. But I mean, I worked on that show for an entire year. And every Wednesday, there was a big chunk of my Wednesday devoted to this show. And I did a lot of marketing and promotion. I put links to the show in all of my hot YouTube videos. I did massive social media campaign on it. I really brought the audience to that show. So for him to just kind of abandon me like that, I feel it's pretty shady.
No, that show without either one of you guys in there, it's not a show anymore. You can see the ratings, you can see the views. Nobody's watching anymore. I look at it now and I go by it. I don't even think I really don't. When you were on there, it was just the arguments, the conversation you guys were having, how you guys were having was beautiful. It was like a piece of art.
And I tell everybody it was the collection of, because people always hit me up and say, "Oh, the show's nothing without you," and I always say, "Nah, it was us three together."
Yes.
And I think Nori said it the best. He said it, the Gangster Chronicles was like the TV show The Wire. You got the gangster, you got the cop, and then you got the guy that researches the gangster and the cop. And he said that blend right there was magic. And it was us three together having these conversations.
I haven't seen him since he was off.
Yeah, I have. Well, hopefully that guy comes to his senses. And if he was actually a smart businessman, he would swallow his pride and he would give Mr. Alex Alonso a phone call. Not I'm gonna fucking sue him up.
I think at this point I wouldn't even know. Actually, I spoke to another person from his circle that called me up and said, "Hey, can I get you guys to at least have lunch or dinner?" I said, "Well, if you can make that happen, I'll do it."
That's right.
I waited about a week, nothing. I waited another 2 weeks. So this guy clearly has moved on beyond me being a part of this show ever. I'm convinced of that.
But now you just started your own podcast, right?
Well, what I did was the first podcast I put out is the Street TV podcast, which I'm going to take interviews that I've done and I'm going to convert them into one episode, and then I'm going to provide commentary throughout the interview to give people context of maybe what was going on in my head, where we were at, what was I thinking, and then give some more meaning to what the people were saying. So I just put out the first episode on the Street TV podcast this week.
Now, how are you managing with all this stuff? Because, I mean, you're busy, brother. You're throwing a lot of content out there every day.
Man, I don't know. I really don't know. Sometimes I don't sleep for a couple days, or I get very little sleep, or this is why I got my sons with me right now, because it's important for me to be with them as much as I can, because I'm always working. But when the weekends come, it's usually with them. So wherever I'm at on the weekend, I'm going to try to have my sons with me. And plus, I got other things I do. I consult on criminal court cases. I literally have like 30 cases on my desk. COVID has slowed that down a little bit. We haven't been in trial on any cases since COVID has happened. In fact, we're doing our first jury selection for a adult trial in Los Angeles County this month. So it'll be the first trial happening since COVID. It will be happening this month. So I'll be getting back into court. I don't know, man, how I do it, man. I just do it.
How's the toll? Is there any toll in your relation with you and your wife sometimes? You're being too busy? Because I know I'm not even half as busy. And sometimes, it becomes a problem. Yeah,
it does. There's no doubt about it. I think every relationship is going to suffer to a certain degree. But you got to work through it. And I have my own studio office. So, for example, my wife has a lot of work to do also. So I told her, come to my place, come to my office and come do work. And we spend the whole day together. Right. So I think that was on, that happens at least once a week. So we figure it out.
That's right. I saw on your Instagram, and I'm a fan of your Instagram, believe it or not. I saw on your Instagram, you were talking about they're using certain social media on cases. Can you talk about a couple of cases where guys are getting busted and they're doing stupid stuff on social media where it's relating to their case?
Yeah, just about every single case. If you're arrested for an assault, a shooting, a murder, the LAPD or the LA Sheriff's Department or the local city, it could be Gardena, Inglewood, they're going to subpoena all of your social media, and they are going to request everything that you've deleted. They're going to request all the DMs, the private messages, and they're going to request the passwords and all of that stuff. And unfortunately, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they almost always cooperate. Twitter sometimes gives a little resistance, but for the most part, you have to answer a subpoena. And one good example is I had a case. This was a really crazy case because I knew the guy's father. In fact, the defendant, I saw him born. I saw him born in 1988, and here we are. Now he's a murder defendant. So in his particular case, he had a bunch of stuff on his Instagram that wasn't so flattering. So he called up his girlfriend right when he got arrested and said, hey, log into my Instagram and delete everything. So she went in there and started deleting everything. And that's the worst thing you want to do because they used that in the case. So not only did they bring in the Instagram, they also bring in your pattern of deletion. So there's like, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this man was having all of this stuff deleted after he was arrested. That's just overwhelming evidence usually against you. So, yeah, man, I put that post on Instagram just to let people know this is real.
But that is not new either.
It's not new, but
back in my days when we had the chat line, people would get on there and start banging on each other. They had a free chat line. You all got on the phone and talked. And fools were getting busted for talking about, oh, I killed your homeboy. I did this to your homeboys. I did this to your... They're going back and getting busted. Yeah. Giving them like terms. So that was our idea of social media back then. So, this is nothing.
You're right. It's nothing new. It's like wiretapping. I mean, cops been listening on people's phone calls forever. But what I wanted to do is, I don't think anyone ever actually saw a warrant that says Twitter and Instagram. And I think seeing that document, it makes it more tangible to the people, especially younger people, to say, oh, wow, the LAPD is requesting Twitter information.
Well, it's not that it's nothing new, but the difference of the intensity of what these guys are doing nowadays. Now they're doing the crime on camera. You got a lot of guys going and doing drive-bys on camera, beatdowns on camera. Like it's like they got to show everybody, look how I'm banging. Now it's like they have to bang on Instagram at the same time they're banging on the streets.
I got a little insight on that. I had talked to somebody about that one time.
Right.
So what are you doing putting that crap on there? And his thing was, they deleted it right away. It's only out for a little bit in this time. They don't keep it in record. But that's just something that heard somewhere else, that they believe that they can put it on there and the cops can't retrieve it because it gets deleted right away on its own. And whatever you put on a computer is going to stay there on the internet, right?
Case, right? They can get all deleted stuff out.
The only way they can't get deleted items is if you're operating on an encrypted app. Are you familiar with encrypted apps?
Yes.
So I would recommend, and I'm not saying this for people who are committing crimes and doing anything illegal, but if you're someone that covets your privacy and you just don't want anyone peering into what you're doing, use an encrypted app. It makes it more difficult for the police and for the feds to monitor it.
Yeah, but if you want to be private, don't put it on the internet.
Well, let's say, but let's say, for example, you want to send a photo to someone that lives in Brazil.
Right.
The only way you're going to send that is digitally.
Right. And
if you want to maintain a level of privacy, the best way to send that photo would be through an encrypted app.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So let's talk a little bit, and the reason I wanted to get you on the show was because of...
Oh, here it goes. Here it goes.
How different our views are on certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But here it goes. Here it goes.
I definitely... Listen, I got to respect you just who you are and what you do with all with your platform and everything else, Alonso. I just disagree with a lot of the stuff, especially lately. Right now, it's so, everybody's kind of so sensitive.
Yeah.
So let's start off first with mass incarceration.
Okay.
The 94 bill, right? Everybody, like even Biden runs from it. And I'm like, Biden, you shouldn't run from that bill, man. I understand why they incarcerate a whole bunch of people, but at the time, me personally, I thought that. Now I was in jail when that bill took place. I was in Y already for my first time.
The 3 strikes law,
right?
The 94 bill was the 3 strikes.
No, the 3 strikes was the state of California bill. The 94 bill that Biden was pushing was a federal bill that mandated mandatory minimum sentences. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I think I personally think like bills like that at the time were correct because if you know the amount of violence, gang murders, the streets how it was in the 90s. What could they do back then different?
Well, my criticism against the bills is that there were a whole lot of people that went to prison that shouldn't have been arrested. So, for example, if you had a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years for a drug offense, but they didn't specify quantities that you had to be in possession of, a kilo of cocaine can land you in prison for 10 to 20, and a half ounce of crack cocaine can land you in prison for 10 to 20 years. So going to prison for a few grams of cocaine, I felt was unfair. And then especially all the people that went to prison for marijuana offenses. Marijuana was criminalized in all 50 states in the 90s. Now we're looking at it as the big mistake. Right. It's sort of like criminalizing alcohol during the Prohibition period. So, I mean, there are certain aspects of this type of enforcement that we could look at and pull back from and say, okay, this part was probably a little over the top. This part was over the top. Even with the 3 strikes. The 3 strikes bill was inspired by the murder of, was it Sally Claus? Or Molly, I forget her first name. But we saw people going to prison that stole jeans. The guy from Newport Beach grabbed a slice of pizza.
That's right.
Got 20 years. He didn't do the 20 years, but that's the part of mass incarceration that I'm a critic of. The same stuff that Michelle Alexander talks about in her book. So, yeah, the 90s, the early 90s was one of the most violent periods, like from 87 to like 95. But did we have to put all those people in prison? That's the question I pose.
Yeah, I don't think we did, but I think to try to go back now and rewrite the law, no, obviously, like you said, now we have to learn from it, unfortunately. I think nowadays more people know you sell dope, you do this, you're going to go to prison. But like right now in California, they're trying to lower the population, right? And they passed a few laws, and actually a few have been good. I just had a homie yesterday get out. He had a murder conviction. He just got out yesterday, the day before. They overturned it because he wasn't the shooter. I forgot what law that was they changed where, usually you're in the car, everybody in the car gets life for one guy shooting. He got out. So that kind of stuff I understand, but I think California itself is just overpopulated. They're trying to get these guys out here in the streets, but when they start releasing the prison population, crime goes up. Does it not?
Well, I haven't seen that data. Right now, I don't know about 2020 because 2020 is not over with. We've had COVID and we've had major protests. But as of 2019, California was extremely low in crime. 2019, 2018, 2017. And this is the same time where we're releasing people out of California Department of Corrections. We went from 180,000 inmates in the CDC down to about 120. So we got 60,000 more people on the streets, but our crime hasn't went up in the last 5 years. I haven't seen anything. But now 2020 is a whole nother story, and I'm still not even convinced that 2020 is going to be that bad when it's all when the year finishes. But no, I haven't seen that data.
When you see the stats, it's mostly they play around with the stats. If this isn't a crime, this isn't a felony. Me personally, what I see more homeless in the streets. Mm-hmm. I see more dope fiends on the streets. I see more drug transitions out here in North Hollywood. I'm sure you saw a few tents coming over here. Where every year it's getting more tent city, more like downtown LA out here.
No, that's a different crime. That's a different issue. Like if we're talking about crime, you can't play around with murders. We know how many murders happen. There's no fudging murder numbers. Right. And even though there are not a lot of murder is not always the best measurement of a crime rate, but we have that because I like using it because it's more accurate. Right. LA was having over 1,000 murders a year in the late 80s, early 90s. We had like 240 last year. Not only did we drop by, 75%, going from 1,000 murders a year to 250, but our population went from 2.8 million in the late 80s to 4 million. So we've increased our population by over 1 million and reduced our homicide rate by 75%.
I also think that the gangs also have something to do with that, with the lack of numbers. The numbers aren't the same as they were. The gang numbers have gone down quite a bit too, and I think that has a lot to do with the murders and everything else with it.
Well, the city of LA says we have 42,000 documented gang members.
Oh, yeah, they'll say he's a gang.
Yeah, well,
that's the problem. They'll put anybody there because the cops.
Why are you pointing fingers at me? Stop pointing fingers.
The cops with that, the cops do go out there and try to put people as gang members for their money.
But they've always done that. I actually think that during the 80s and 90s, we had less gang members than we had today.
Oh, no, I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know what?
We had less gangs and less gang members. The number of gangs and the number of gang member, the gang member population from the late 80s to about 94 was smaller than what it is today.
I don't believe it.
Yeah.
But you see the gang members are different. You can't tell a gangbanger now.
I think
it's hard to tell a gang member because a lot of them don't even dress like a gang member.
But I don't think gangs...
Back then we did, so we could tell who they were.
The rivalries and the level of conflict is a little bit different than it is today. We're seeing gangs that used to just wake up in the morning and just go at it. They're not even doing that. Like the 60s, the Rolling 60s Crips and the THRU Gangster Crips. You look at that war from 1979, from probably 15 years after that, was crazy. They're not even thinking about each other today. And technically that war still exists.
Right.
There's not an official truce, but they're not even banging on each other like it was. So there's been a transition to the way gangs operate. And I would argue the Rolling 60s Crips are bigger today than they were then, and so are the THRU Gangsters. Both those gangs.
Well, that's what I mean about the gangs kind of switching it up. Now, the gangs aren't as aggressive as they were because I think most older guys are telling me, man, you're killing each other for nothing, man. Let's make some money. Let's do some business.
Yep.
Which, that's one thing I will kind of, I guess, give props to, like the BLM movement and all that. It's awakened a lot of people to stop, doing stuff like that and hopefully have a little more love. But on the other side of the token, I think it's like police brutality. Let's get into that. You're a very advocate on the cops. You're I don't know, you're a defund the police officer or where do you stand on that?
Well, I don't know what defund the police means because I've heard at least 10 people speak on it and they had 10 different meanings of it. So I am definitely a proponent for looking at the budgets of law enforcement. I mean, we do it in our military. We had military cutback budgets depending on who's the president because we spend billions of dollars on our budget monthly, especially when we're in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we spend hundreds of millions on policing. And sometimes some of that money is being, there's a lot of pork in these budgets. I've heard cops say, yeah, I'm going to do this overtime to get my kids through college. And 9 cops, I posted this on Instagram, 9 cops in another jurisdiction outside of California were indicted for faking overtime. There is a lot of pork in these law enforcement budgets, and they're always asking for more, and they never say we want less. So a police budget is always growing. And sometimes it's not even justified. Why is it growing? They just want more money. So in that sense, I think they need to be looked at.
It's like the teachers union.
It's like almost every everyone wants more money.
Every city.
And here's the thing with LA. We have 10,000 sworn police officers. We have 22 divisions. We have 4 million people. And they're always saying, we need more cops. We need more cops. We need more cops. That's their number one argument. I remember when Mayor Villaraigosa was the mayor of LA, he would speak to the Los Angeles community and say, crime is down. We're at the lowest it's ever been since the 50s. Yeah. We're doing a great job. But then he'd go to Washington, D.C., and he'd say, we need more money. We need to hire more cops. I'm like, you were just here in L.A. saying how low the crime was, but now you're in Washington, D.C. talking about we need to hire more cops. There's a contradiction there. Yeah. And they just want more money.
Yeah, well, that's why I say I don't really trust the numbers when they say, oh, crime is down. Just out here in my area, I don't really need to read the newspaper. I see it, and it's definitely kind of on an upper trend. And
what's on an upper trend?
I would say the gang activity, for sure. A couple homicides around this area. The dope dealing around this area has definitely gone up. It was, like I said, it was going down, but in the last, I think ever since the last thing they passed, AB 109 and all that stuff, you could definitely see more people out here. For a minute in my neighborhood, it was dead. It was nobody there. Now you go by there, you see hit-ups, and it's more active than it was a few years ago.
Well, 2020 is a year that we're going to have to really, research and understand it because of all the things that happened, from protests to COVID to law enforcement, law enforcement response. 2020 is unique. Prior to 2020, though, 2019 and back, I think crime was at an all-time low. What you're talking about is right now, right? And I think it's too early. You can never really talk about a year in terms of crime until the year is finished, so we can look back at it and understand the trends. North Hollywood is part of Los Angeles. And when I look at the data. I always look at it more as a city, and then you could zoom in and start looking at certain areas. But at the end of the day, I want to know how many homicides happen in Los Angeles, not on my block or not on this block, because there's always going to be a spike in one area and a decline in another area. So when you look at just your area, you might be ignoring the displacement. Maybe the surrounding area is seeing 100% decrease, and it's being pushed in an area that you see more often. So we got to look at the bigger trends for the whole city. And I guarantee you that we're not going to have more than 300 homicides at the end of 2020. And that's amazing for a city of our size. 4 million people with the number of gang members that they say we have, 40,000, to have less than 300 homicides. That's amazing. That's like that homicide rate would be equivalent to like 50 years ago.
So you're taking those numbers and saying that's a very low number. Now let me take the same numbers they would use for police shootings on unarmed black men. I think last year was less than 20?
Yes.
And I think if you watch the media, even if I watch some of your stuff on Instagram, you would think that your kids are out there hiding from the cops and just scared of police officers. At least that's a narrative that's kind of being pushed out there. My kids ain't hiding from them. Like straight up, I don't really sweat them. I see them. I don't like most cops, but it is what it is. Mm-hmm. But I think that narrative of just African Americans being murdered on the streets, being lynched by the thing, I think it's getting pushed. And with the numbers you're saying, that's less than 20 people. That's not a low number.
Well, the thing about that is the narrative that they're pushing on BLM, and when I see them talking on the news, is, I had to go talk to my son, and I had to tell my son, if a cop out stops you, put your hands on the steering wheel. Like, they make it seem like that's like an everyday conversation with them. Is that happening with your kids?
Well, I've had that conversation with my kids. And I do worry about it, because I'm not just worried about the 20 shootings that caused death. I'm worried about the 100 of shootings where they survived, because about 80% of police shootings, the victim survives, or maybe 60 or 70. I had that wrong. And then I'm not just worried about those. I'm also worried about the beatings and the assaults, and then the unlawful search and seizures of cars. So you take that 20 murders, and then you take the ones that got shot and survived. Okay, here we go. We got 20 murders. Yeah. Then we have those that got shot and survived and recovered. Then we have those that got shot and have permanent injury. They're paralyzed. I mean, we can keep on going and going. So you're looking at the most extreme result of a negative interaction with the police, but there is a whole gamut of other results when that number ends up becoming 50, 100, hundreds, and then thousands when you go across the whole country. How many people get pulled over and get pulled out of their car, handcuffed for no reason? In fact, it happened to me because I posted a video of it. Yeah. And that's humiliating to me. There's no reason why a professor on his way to a track meet of his son gets pulled over and then pulled out of his car and handcuffed and on the sidewalk for 20 minutes for all of my neighbors to drive by and see. That's also a part of this whole, story.
This number that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Of all these, the murders down to everything, trickling down to everything, the beatings, everything. Okay. Is that bigger now than it was 10 years ago or in the 90s?
Well, there's no way to know, because no one is collecting data, especially nationally, on every single interaction with law enforcement by race. We don't know how often it happens to Latinos, to blacks, to Asians. So I don't know.
With that being said, though, then how come they're pushing that narrative about the BLM?
Wait, say that again?
How come they're pushing that narrative with the BLM then?
Like it's worse today.
Yeah, that it's worse today than it's ever been. And why are they pushing it if they don't have the data and they don't know about the races?
Well, there is some data.
Why are they pushing that narrative?
Well, here's some data that does exist that might make it seem worse today than before. Since, for example, Jackie Lacey, the LADA, she's had over 600 cases where people died in police custody, and that's 8 years. 600 people died in police custody. Some of them are nothing against the police, but some of them are. But out of those 600, guess how many were indicted and charged?
Probably zero.
No, one. Okay. One cop. And he got charged for an off-duty shooting that he committed at a parking lot of a bar. So the question is, and I just interviewed Dream Team lawyer Carl Douglas about this. the guy that was on the defense team for O.J. Simpson.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. That's right.
He said in an interview, which I haven't posted yet, if we have 600 people dying in police custody, there's got to be at least more than one. Yeah, more than one bad one, more than one that's chargeable. And we understand Jackie Lacey rarely ever charges cops. You know, the police union supporter, they're not going to charge. So there's some data there. Is that 600 more than normal? I don't know. I have to look under Cooley, when Cooley was the DA. And then we got to go back and look at when Ira Reiner was the DA and see at what rate. So I don't know, but like everyone says, we have more cameras, we have more phones, and we're documenting this more. So we're definitely seeing this more.
Well, I know from when I was younger, the brutality of the police were a lot worse than it is now. From the time that I run across those police officers, they're not as violent as they were back in the days. Back in the days, you know what you had coming.
Well, it all depends on what department you're talking about, and then what part of the department.
It's basically the police department at that time, and sheriffs were probably worse than all of them.
Well, the sheriffs right now are beating your ass in the Compton.
Because that's what they normally do.
Lenox, Compton, and there's another one down in South LA, and then the Newton division of the LAPD. Everyone that tells me they're beating your ass down there in Newton. Now, I live in the Wilshire Division. Wilshire Division is not going to beat your ass because they just have a different culture there. So it all depends on the culture of the specific department and, you know, the city. Then we're hearing stories in other states and other cities, they're whipping ass.
Do you think that also sometimes it's like lack of self-impulse? Because a lot of these shootings, it would just be, I understand like how you had your issue, you got pulled over. If you wouldn't have cuffed up, Alonso may not be here. If you would have got aggressive, Alonso may not be here.
But I felt like I should have got aggressive.
Yeah, but you're smarter than me.
Yeah, but if I would have got aggressive, I would have been within my right, I would say, right legal standing to be aggressive because it was an unlawful stop.
But your idea of aggressive and my idea of aggressive are two different things.
Well, my idea of aggressive is physical.
Okay, but you get somebody from the streets, and then your professor. You might get aggressive and talk crap, and you might even struggle a little. Guy from the streets a lot of time will take flight. You know, they're going to rush them, and that's when they get killed.
Well, you saw what was the one in Boyle Heights? The guy that
he got socked up.
He got socked up, and I think that the guy that got socked up, he could have took flight. He would have been in his right.
Yes, he would have got killed.
Maybe.
I think he would have got killed. He would have got killed. Yeah, but it was on all rights that he should have took flight.
If the female partner would have pulled her gun out and killed him, that would have been a crime because there was no lethal threat. If the cop took flight first, as we saw, and he responded, and they're squabbing in the street, that's not a lethal threat.
Yeah, but the way they're going to get away with it is saying that she was protecting her partner.
Yeah, but it was all on camera.
Reaching for a gun.
No, it was all on camera. It was on body cam and someone across the street.
I understand that.
That guy,
that's what they're going to do.
He would have been in his legal right to take flight back to defend himself. He didn't. He just was. I don't know if he was cuffed at the time. No, he wasn't even cuffed. He just took it. But
the thing about that is, look at say he did struggle and they did smoke him, they did kill him. Then, they would have been in trouble, but he would still been there.
No, but I don't think he would have got shot. That female, if you look at that, the female officer was actually trying to stop him. Yeah. And you know what? Majority of shootings by police officers happen from men. Very rarely, there was one in the last 5 years I know of, very rarely does a woman pull out her gun and feel the need to kill. And I really think they need to hire more female cops because they use de-escalation more often. That woman would have had a better conversation with that guy on that street than that guy did.
Well, in the CDC and the prison system, they would rather have a woman as a gunner because a woman, from what I understood, they were talking about it was she's more reasonable. She's going to be more patient about it until after the fact that it happens. But up until that point, they're more reasonable than a man.
The only problem is they're not as physically strong,
right? No,
and it gives them the challenge out there in the field.
As a gunner,
yeah.
So when they're in the towers and a gunner, they would much rather have a woman than a man because a man is quicker on the trigger than a woman is.
Yeah.
I think also a lot of it is, like you said, if you would have got aggressive, and you were in your right, you absolutely were. But there's a time and a place to fight that, and unfortunately, and I see it in brown people, but I definitely see it more in African American young ones, especially because it's like they just hate the cops so much. It's inbred in them, and I understand. But there's a time and place. If you're gonna fight it right there, get ready to get shot, dude. You need to kind of tone down. Know you're getting recorded, and there's a place to fight. You're gonna fight it in court, because if you keep fighting the streets, you're gonna keep losing. You're not gonna go against the cops.
Believe it or not, you probably saved some people by publicizing what you did, because they seen the fact that you didn't take flight or get aggressive with them.
And I was hot.
And
I really was.
No, that shows these youngsters that you can deal with this and still, not get shot.
And I got to be an example for my two sons, So
that was a good thing that you showed them.
And I teach them to comply. And I said, don't even act like me. I've earned a position in society, a level of respect that my sons haven't earned yet. And what's that?
I'm trying to turn his mic up real quick.
Okay. I think a lot of times these police officers know who I am, and they may be a little reluctant to do something to me.
Right.
They know that they're pulling me over. They know who I am, but at the same time, they want to bust my chops. But my sons are too young to have earned any level of respect in society to mouth off at a police officer,
No, I got the impression when I seen it that they knew who you were before they stopped you. That they were just harassing you. Because there was no reason to get you off the car. There was no reason to cuff you. They knew who you were. They were fucking with you.
And I wasn't.
Well, at least that was the impression I got.
I wasn't even speeding either. So as soon as they do that, this happens to me a lot. And I don't know if it's because I'm in an Escalade, but I got an older truck. It's not as new. I used to get pulled over a lot when it was brand new. But one time I got pulled over by an LAPD officer for staring at him at the intersection. I was at the red light. I swear. I'm at the red light. And they're making a left turn in front of me, and the passenger looks at me, and while the passenger is passing me, I just stare at him while he stares at me. My light turns green, I go forward, and I look, they're busting a U. So I'm waiting. I already know. When I see that U-turn, I already know they're pulling me over. Pulled me over, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'm pulling you over because you was on your cell phone." I was like, my cell phone is nowhere even around here, and it's just harassment, and I don't even understand why are you harassing me? I'm the last person that you want to harass. I'm out here.
You got a platform.
I'm out here, taking care of my family and working hard every day, and you guys want to harass me, But it happens maybe 3 times a year, I'd say.
So what do you think is? I mean, obviously there's no one right answer, but what do you think will help within the relationship, especially within the African American community and the police departments?
What they need to do is you got to have more black cops. If you notice, there's not a lot of black cops. There's not a lot of black cops in the LA County Sheriff Department. There's not a lot of black cops in the LAPD. And it is predominantly Mexican American.
Yeah.
If you look at all the cops in Compton, Mexican American. You look at the LAPD in all the South LA divisions, they're either white or Mexican American. And I think that black people hate the police so much, as you said, Gil, they don't even want to work for the police. I mean, there's not a generation of young black nerds that want to go into law enforcement, They rather go into the military. And I think that we need more black cops so that they can create that balance in the community when they're out there stopping them. Like Reggie Wright, who used to be my co-host on the GANGSTER Chronicles, he tells me all kinds of stories of police in Compton, policing where he grew up. And not ever did he think that he was going to pull his gun out and want to shoot one of these gangsters. He knew all of them.
Right. He
had a relationship with all of them. He knew their families. There was a bond between law enforcement and the community to where it's very unlikely that you're going to pull your gun out and shoot that guy in the corner. That doesn't exist today. These guys don't even live in the neighborhood. And if you notice, a lot of these shootings of blacks that are sometimes armed but mostly unarmed are from Mexican Americans or whites. Very rarely is a black cop shooting someone.
But I think once they get into whatever line, sheriff, LAPD, they're not even colored. They're cops. They're blue.
Well, how about this? You heard about the executioners?
Yes.
They don't allow blacks in the executioners.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So there is this little bit of a racial divide, and we're learning about the executioners because of a Mexican American whistleblower snitch, informant, whatever you want to call it. It's crazy to call a cop a snitch because a cop is telling on another cop. But isn't it crazy that the snitch culture is also strong, I should say the no snitch culture is also strong within law enforcement ranks?
Oh, it's probably stronger in law enforcement than it is in most gangs.
Yeah. Well, like in the county jail, if there's a racial riot between blacks and Hispanic, if I got caught and handcuffed by a Mexican, they're just shooting me to another dorm. If I get caught by a black, I'm going to the hole. And it's vice versa.
Speak on that.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm talking about.
There is racial tension. There's cops that will walk up and tell you, hey, homie, the blacks are going to rush you guys today. And vice versa. Hey, brother, they're going to rush you. Because I was in CRC, and I'm after my term, and there was a black lieutenant named Lieutenant Chambers. And she was like, you ain't fucking with my people. You know what I mean? This is a racial hell. They group up, on both sides of the law. They back each other up, regardless. It's just in the color of their skin.
Yeah, there's no doubt. How many black people have told me whenever they go to the county jail and see all the Mexican deputies in there, it's not going to go well.
But there's a lot of black deputies at
they do. They do.
There is a lot.
Yeah.
And it goes both ways. It ain't just one way. It goes both ways.
But I think it'll be hard it's not going to be hard. It is difficult to be an African-American police officer, especially in today's day and age, brother, because a lot of times they'll call them sellouts, they'll call them coons, they'll call them this, straight up, instead of calling them, hey, like Jackie Lacey, it's funny how a lot of these prominent African-American politicians, the black community is killing them right now. It's pretty much, if you're not bowing down to our way of thinking, you're no good. And or me personally, I'm like, damn, that's a black lady that's in high power. That's cool. That should be something you look up to. But right now, to be a cop and be black, it's tough.
Yeah, it is tough, but we definitely have to change that. I have no problem with a black kid that decides, hey, I want to go to the police academy. I applaud that. I salute that.
That's a good career.
Yeah, it's a great career for you. My son wants to, I don't know if he feels that way now, but he wanted to go into the FBI.
That's right.
And I completely support that. Coming from someone that has critiqued law enforcement, and I actually testify against him in court, I would support my son completely if he wanted to go that route.
You can overlook some things for me?
That's great to hear, but I think there's a good chunk that aren't teaching their kids like that. There's a good chunk of African Americans right now, especially, let's say, quote unquote, in the hood, that's F the police. You got little kids walking around F the police, and like little 3-7-year-old kids, like, no, man, you're spreading the wrong message. You can critique them, do all that, but you can't raise a whole generation of hate cops, because it's not going to go well on both sides. Well, to a certain degree, the cops are partly guilty for that too. We have to bridge the gap. I think the chief of LAPD right now, Chief Moore, is probably the best chief in the history of that department. I like Bernard Parks, because Bernard Parks, he fired cops. He fired you, but he ruined the morale. Who wants to now be a cop under you when you're firing a whole bunch? But Chief Moore is definitely trying to create a better relationship where he has interfaced with a lot of grassroots organizations and with black and brown folks, and will come to the meetings. And, I hope something positive can be birthed from that, where a young kid sees Chief Moore out there and says, hey, maybe I'll be a cop one day. They do a lot of these community events where they come out and have booths and tables, and they need to do more of that. And of course, they need to do less of kicking our ass, at the same time.
I feel like they're like the way the police approach things. It needs to be different. They need to be trained differently.
Absolutely.
In order to bridge that gap. And I also believe that, like say, district attorneys and police officer accuse somebody of something, and they proceed knowing that they didn't actually do it, but at the same time, they just want the conviction rate. I think they should face the same time that they're trying to put somebody, an innocent person, in jail.
Yeah.
Like, when they say, hey, you know what, we're going to give this guy 15 years. Okay. But they know, or they got evidence showing he didn't do it, and the cops know it, the DA knows it, but they still proceed because they want the conviction. If it comes out later on that they knew where they had that evidence, the scope area evidence or whatever, what that guy was telling us, then maybe they should go get 15 years.
Yeah, that
you know what I mean? And then to top it off, when they should be held pulling their retirement benefits off them,
their pensions,
and instead of the city paying for it, they would come out of their pockets if they're in the wrong.
That was the lawsuits you're talking about. Yeah, that's the thing.
You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
When the sheriffs and the LAPD get sued, the city pays the lawsuits, right? They don't have a fund.
No, well, the sheriffs, they're part of the county, so all their money comes from the county board of supervisors, and then the LAPD, their money comes from the city of LA. So they actually have. I know the LAPD actually has a fund for anticipated lawsuits. Anticipated lawsuits. Yeah. They know they're going to have to pay out X some millions of dollars a year. Yeah. So that money is definitely budgeted into their budgets. So
like that, I can get behind. Somebody said, let's defund that and let's take the money out of their pension.
Yeah, especially if you were involved in a bad shooting. And, very rarely do they conclude it's a bad shooting. But, for example, I don't know how you feel about this one, Gil, but Dijon Kizzy, he was shot. The autopsy just came back, the private autopsy, 15 times. They said he had a gun. They said the gun fell when he was running.
Right.
Of course, when the cop sees a gun on the ground and you're standing right next to it, they're going to light you up.
Yeah.
15 times they shot this guy.
Yeah, I'll be straight up with you. I don't feel like 15 times because I know how fast 15 shots will come out of a gun. It'll be a split-second decision. And should they have shot the guy? We can sit here and say no right now, but the crazy part is if I'm the guy on the bike, that's the guy on the bike, right?
Yes.
If I got a strap and I know I got a strap in the cops, I'm going to stop, brother. I mean, that's just straight up. I'm going to stop because I know I get caught with this gun, they're going to kill me. I think somewhere along the line, that part of the game has been kind of changed and kind of, now it's like he didn't have the gun next to him before. So if you had a gun, it's okay. If you had a knife, they better do this. It's like they're trying to change the rules of engagement, but the rules of engagement still haven't changed. If you got a gun, especially if you're black, if you got a gun and you're black, you better freeze, brother. And I know that's kind of hard pill to swallow sometimes, but that's what's going to happen. You're going to get shot. I mean, should those cops be arrested? I'm not too sure. Should they look at it? Yes. But I think one good thing coming out, they finally got cameras on those guys. And it should be a thing like where if those sheriffs do not have their camera on, they're fired off the bat. Before you even get into the investigation, you guys are fired for not having your camera on. But if you're on parole, you got a strap. That strap isn't made to put water in. That strap's made to kill. You got to stop.
Well, what gives us a sour taste in our mouth is, for instance, that kid that pulled the gun and shot at the cop's head and missed him with the kids at the cop's feet. There was kids playing at the cop's feet.
20-year-old Hakeem Littleton was shot and killed by police early this afternoon, sparking protests on the city's west side.
Detroit Police Gang Squad members pull up on Darnell Sylvester in the white T-shirt here. He's wanted on a federal drug warrant and gives up without incident. Standing next to him in the orange shirt is Hakeem Littleton, a parolee, who the video shows pulls a .25 caliber Beretta semi-automatic from his cargo pants pocket and fires twice at an advancing officer. A closer body cam shot shows Littleton firing at the advancing officer, missing him.
He shot at the cop in the head, missed him, cop dumps him and kills him, and they start rioting over it.
Which one are you talking about? Compton?
No, I think this was like Chicago or something.
Yeah. And I was like, dude, he shot at the cop.
They were arresting his homeboy for some kind of shooting or something. When they arrested his homeboy, he starts backing up and he pulls up the gun, shoots at the cop, misses his head. Then the cop shoot him. Next thing you know, you got riots. It's like,
and that's what gets the sour part is when you gotta. It's like crying wolf. You're doing something. Okay, Floyd, wrong, dead wrong. There's nothing about him.
Absolutely.
But then the opposite. You got this guy shooting at a cop and
you still got the riot. And
you're still rioting. It's not, to me, that's where you lose the argument. You know what I mean?
That's where we disconnect from the BLM movement. As far as the Black Lives Matter, absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Your kids matter all day long, brother. And I support that all the way as a thought, as a whole. But when they start pushing every little thing that actually like, no, dude,
the black community.
Yeah.
We agree on the black community. We don't agree with Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, that's all it is. Yeah.
To us, it's two different things.
Well, I think there's Black Lives Matter as an organization is what you're talking about, but then there's the Black Lives Matter movement, which is just people all over the country, which is separate and disconnected from the Black Lives Matter organization. So sometimes when people say Black Lives Matter, I don't know what you're talking about. You know what I mean?
Can you explain to me what's so offensive about somebody saying all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter?
Because all lives have always mattered. Historically, all lives have mattered.
Okay.
There's never been an issue that
Not ours.
Well, yeah,
we're in the same boat as you guys. That's
white lives have always mattered.
Yes, that's
okay. Now,
cop lives have always mattered.
Yes.
When a cop gets killed, you see the reaction, or even get shot. You saw these 2 deputies in Compton get shot.
Yeah.
They raised almost $1 million in less than a week for reward. But if one of us gets killed, a reward is not coming until the next year when they can't solve our case.
Right.
Then maybe they'll put 10,000, 20, or 30,000 for a reward to catch our killer.
Right.
But they already got $1 million in a week for 2 deputies. So whose lives matter more?
No, obviously the cops. According to them, everything's about them. I understand that. But when you're doing the Black Lives Matter, right? They're marching down the community. That's kind of like infringing on everybody else's that not even participating in their rights. You know what I mean? On how they feel. There was a white lady that got killed because she said all lives matter, and they killed her on one of the marches.
Okay. And she shouldn't have said that.
But it's kind of like
when you walk into a hostile environment, just like you said, you're running with a gun and the police, you better stop. Now, if you go into a hostile environment where people are mad that their loved ones are being shot and some of them getting killed, and you start to chastise that group, you're going to get your ass whipped.
Yeah, but to me, it's like you're infringing my rights. There was one showing that the Black Lives Matter went into this.
But all lives matter.
No, and I do.
Let me translate what all lives matter means.
Okay.
It means white lives are more important than your life is. White lives that's a code, or that's a whistle for white supremacy to say all lives matter.
Okay, but that's your opinion. And I don't mean to be offensive, Alex. I love the shit. I love the shit out of you. To me, that's offensive because you're taking away from how I feel about it. I feel all lives matter, and I'm not just thinking whites, blacks, Mexicans. I'm not thinking just any race. See, to me, when I say it or my daughter says it, it's actually, that's how we feel.
If I knew what people were going to think in 2020 about this Black Lives Matter, and if I was the creator of Black Lives Matter, I would have changed the name of it. I would have said Black Lives Matter 2. I would have added TOO at the end of it, just to end your argument.
Okay, right.
No.
That is good.
We just sat here and said everybody's lives matter. Blue lives matter way more than anyone else. Police.
Apparently.
White lives have always mattered. We didn't have to say that. But black and brown lives haven't quite mattered that much lately.
That's the thing. Like even you said at first, who else? And like we have, and that thing as brown people, brother, we don't get any kind of representation. You said we have a lot of like sheriffs and cops, yeah. But as far as where the real power is, the brothers have that power too. A lot of them are moving up in politics. A lot of them are pushing agendas, and needs more power to them. They're doing what they're supposed to do. And
they're from this soil, so I have to give it to the African Americans. They're from this soil. They were brought here. They were raped, pillaged, and brought here. And I think they've earned their political power, the little bit of political power that African Americans have.
More political power than we do.
Yeah, and it'll be some times when, at some point, all of this political power is going to shift, especially in California, to the Latino side. We already see it. Miami is ran by Cubans.
Right.
They got Cuban mayors, Cuban police chiefs, Cuban fire chiefs. And it's going to happen here in Los Angeles at some point. But because of what blacks have endured in this country and even in this city, going back to the 1600s, I mean, why not have a little bit of power now?
Well, see, look at this is another guy. They have Black Lives Matter written on the street up in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. They shut down 2 blocks to paint it. So they went to go get a permit from the city to do it. Hey, I want to put Black Lives Matter. The city granted it, okay? But if I were to go over there and say I want to put Brown Lives Matter, they're not going to.
Because it's not the climate right now. George Floyd was just killed on camera in front of us on social media. Because of that, we're seeing all of this stuff. If George Floyd was not murdered like that, you wouldn't have seen the mural on Hollywood Boulevard right now. That wouldn't even exist.
No, it's not a mural. It's on the floor. It's a big Black Lives Matter.
Technically, it's a mural. It's a mural. The way that they got the permit is to permit it as a mural. That concrete mural, whatever you want to call it, would not exist without George Floyd being killed right in front of our eyes. So we're seeing the post George Floyd era. And there'll be an era where we start to shift our attention to other groups.
But you don't think that is a wrong message for a kid, like my kids or his kids? You don't think that's a black?
No, because we got to be united.
To me, yeah, exactly.
I think black and brown needs to be united.
They should be united.
Because in the 60s, the Black Panthers and the Brown Berets, they functioned together.
Okay, but when it says black, you lose that unity as far as we're concerned. Well, I'm not saying speaking for him, but my thoughts on it, we lose that unity because it ain't about us anymore. It's about you.
Well,
and that's what I don't like my kids seeing.
I see what you're saying, that you feel like it's not as inclusive, but this is the post George Floyd era. George Floyd was black. He was killed by a white cop. He was killed on basically live television. And
but why does it make it more important that you guys can voice your opinion, but it's offensive if we voice our opinion? All of a sudden it's racial. Even if the brown man speaks up and says, I'm not cool with it, then it's racial.
I don't think people will be offended.
A lot of people are.
Oh, they will. You better look at the comment section. They're gonna
they're going to be all over me. Trust me.
Yeah. Well,
you're going to see me hanging from a Mexican tree.
We can't let the comments kind of shape the way we view the world, but I've been to about, 5 or 6 of Black Lives Matter protests, the ones that are the anti-Jackie Lacey ones.
Right.
And it is heavily supported by brown and white people.
No, it is heavily supported by.
So I'm seeing a good representation of brown people there. And they're holding up the Black Lives Matter signs. But then at the same time, they're holding up smaller signs like Brown Lives Matter, LBGT Lives Matter. There's like 5 or 6 other sub Lives Matter signs that are being held too under the banner of Black Lives Matter. And it seems like everyone is cool with it.
But to me, you guys bit into the narrative with where they're putting out on the media. Because to me, when Floyd got killed, it wasn't a black man that got killed. It was a man that got killed by the cops. Yeah, and that's the way they should have portrayed it in the media, saying a man was held down 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
But you're
something like that.
You're erasing his blackness as maybe an influence of why Officer Derek Chauvin put his knee on that neck.
But you can't say distinctly that it was because of his color that he killed him.
But you can't deny that that's a possibility.
You can't, yes.
And historically, it's a strong possibility that he kept his knee on that neck for 8 minutes because he was black.
Okay, I understand that. But there's a slight chance that it wasn't that. He just didn't like the man. And to me, when you go to the media, it should have been a man got killed. They had it on his neck for 8 minutes. This shit's wrong. But no, the media went to, it's a black man, which caused it. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, if the media did not point out that he was black and just said it's a man, people would be critical to say, hey, how are you ignoring the possible role that race played here?
But that's a word. That's a key word, possible.
It's a strong possibility, Sonny, when you look at this thing historically.
Oh, yeah.
But you're one of the guys that go to court and fight for people on that small possibility that it might not be. Right?
What do you mean?
When you go to court and you fight for somebody, use that it possibly might not. There's that small percentage that said it's not. It might be possible he wasn't thinking like this. But then when you're using it with the BLM, it's, we're using that small possibility.
Well, when I'm in court, I think that possibility of innocence or being the victim of trumped up charges, that possibility, that window gets bigger and bigger. I believe that a majority of our defendants sitting in the LA County Jail are overcharged. I believe that more than half of them have gang enhancements that are unlawfully applied.
Well, you know me. I get that 186.22.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm one of very few that have that. I can't get a passport because of it. But I'm telling you, and I know it's overcharged, but it's that possibility that I'm talking about. That you're saying it was this, but what if it wasn't that? What if it was just say he had a bad day that day?
What you're telling me, Sonny, is you need Officer Derek Chauvin to tell you, yeah, I put my knee on his neck because he was black, which is never going to happen.
Right.
You
but
know,
you need,
that's the only way. That's what you need, and that's not going to happen. You know, we have to be able to read between the lines, look at things historically, understand the history of Minnesota, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
But it ain't just with Floyd.
You'll be here for 2 hours.
All of these. No, but I'm saying it ain't just with Floyd.
No. Did George Floyd get a boot on his neck because he's black? I'll say yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind that cops look at black and brown people less than.
What about the guy at Wendy's?
Huh?
What about the guy at Wendy's?
The guy at Wendy's, he had a gun.
Okay, but ask him.
Ask me.
The gentleman at Wendy's.
In Atlanta, Georgia.
In Atlanta, Georgia. The cops went over there, talked to him for about 30, 40 minutes.
Was it because he was black?
My man. Hey. Come in. Hey. Hey, man, you're parked in the middle of the drive-thru line here. Hey.
Copy 41 injured.
Sir.
25 westbound at Jones.
What's up, man?
25 west.
Hey, you're parked in the drive-thru right now. Hey, sir. You right?
Black Toyota Camry and
Dude, you're parked. You're sitting in the drive-thru line here. What's up? So you're parked in the drive-thru line. You're blocking traffic here. You were sleeping when I walked up here. What's up, man? You used to have a long day or something? What's up? Alright, yeah, you can't, you're blocking, people calling said you were blocking me, alright? You good? You don't need an ambulance or anything like that? Are you just tired? Alright, man, just I'll move my car. Just pull somewhere and take an out. Alright.
2805 Grand Avenue. 2805.
Alright, you good?
Yeah.
Alright.
There is a significant chance that if that guy was not black, that police stop would have lasted 5 to 10 minutes.
He was drunk.
Yeah. What did he tell him? Pull your car up in the spot and call someone to come.
But he ran over the curb after that.
Cops will give the benefit of the doubt to white people, non-blacks and non-browns more times than not. Now, you're right. We can't prove that stop was inspired by race, but historically, again,
I get the historical.
Because he's black.
No, but that guy was asleep in the drive-thru. Somebody called him in. They went in, and this was right after George Floyd, so the cops.
Okay, but how many people are asleep in a car when the cops come and just tell you, "Oh, pull over there and call your wife to come pick you up"? That probably happens thousands of times a year to white folks.
He smelled like booze. The guy was drunk. You could tell when he was talking.
He was in the drive-thru line.
He's so drunk that he was able to.
He was in the drive-thru line when he fell asleep.
He was in the drive-thru, fell asleep. He's drunk. At the point where he started hitting those officers and going for the guns.
Okay, wait. We're not even at the point where we're starting hitting. We're talking about the 30 minutes.
Let's get there.
The 30 minutes. Let's not even get to that part yet. Why are the cops on this dude for 30 minutes when we know that if this person was white, it would have been a 5 to 10 minute stop. They would have told him, look, you're a little intoxicated. Pull your car over here. You're not on the street. Just call your wife to come pick you up. And it's over with. That happens thousands of times a year.
I'll tell you why I think. I think it was right after the George Floyd incident. These cops were trying to give this guy every single opportunity to have a conversation and not look like they were being aggressive or being racist towards him. So they gave him 30 minutes. Most cops ain't going to give you 30 minutes. They're going to cuff you up. You're going in. And then all the whole video, the cops are being very respectful, very calm. Even the guy, he's very, very cool. But then from 1 second to the next, the guy starts hitting the cops. Again, what do you think's going to happen when you start hitting cops and going for the guns? You're going to get shot. I don't understand.
Yeah, but all of that happened after the fact.
Yeah.
So there was no de-escalation in this stop.
There was never an escalation.
Well, there was a point where one of the cops realized, I'm taking this man to jail. Okay. Even though we give the benefit of the doubt to people who've done the exact same thing that brother has done many times before.
Now let me explain. He fell asleep in the drive-thru. Cop, you know what? Pull over to the side. I'm going to let you sleep it off. But he goes over the curb. That's when the cop was like, man, now it's too much. So let me call an expert on DUIs because I don't want to get into it with this dude. So that a good part of that 30 minutes was waiting for that DUI expert to come and do the thing. And then he gave him the utmost respect when he performed the DUI.
Yeah, but
and told him, I'm going to have to cuff you up. You're going in for DUI.
What's this brother's name? Because we're talking about the dead and we ain't even referring to his name.
Look it up, buddy.
Yeah.
And then when he starts...
Rashard Brooks.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then when he starts, he starts fighting and struggling, what do you expect the cops to do if the guy shoots a taser at him?
Let me ask you this, Sonny. Was Rashard Brooks on his best behavior during that stop?
In the beginning.
Yes.
Up until the conflict, yeah.
Yes.
For about how many minutes was he on his best behavior? Was it just 5? Was it 10? Was it 15? Was it about 20?
Up to the point when he hit the cop, that best behavior doesn't mean anything.
Okay, but how long do we have to be subjected to a police stop? If this is a DUI, he should have been arrested much sooner. Why wait? I think it was actually 35 minutes, 40 minutes.
He was waiting for the DUI expert to come.
Because the George Floyd thing just happened, and right now, a cop trying to sit there and just get aggressive with the black guy, handcuff him because right away they're going to say
No, that one cop that got shot with the taser?
Yeah.
Actually called a DUI expert to come in. And there was time lapse right there.
I didn't know you have to call in another cop to arrest.
He did. He called the DUI expert.
My daughter's birthday intent to, have a good time. And I said, babe, I'm hungry. Let's go. My baby's mom, she was there. I said, babe, go ahead. I'm cool. Here's the money for the blow-up bed tomorrow. Here's the money for... to enjoy herself tomorrow. Just, give me a burger or something. Just take me home. I'm ready to go.
So you had about 1.5 drinks, but you don't remember what kind of drinks they were?
No, sir.
All right.
I really don't, Mr.
All right. I think you've had too much to drink to be driving. Put your hands behind your back for me. Here, put your hands behind your back. Hey, stop fighting. Stop fighting. Stop fighting. Stop fighting. You're going to get tased. You're going to get tased. Stop.
Mr. Ross.
Stop.
Come on, man.
Stop. You're going to get tased.
Mr. Ross.
Hey, hands off the fucking taser. Hands off the taser. Stop fighting. Hands off the taser.
Everybody was acting civil. Everybody was acting right. So sometimes it's, why did they get aggressive so quick? They were acting right. When that guy hit the cop, that's when he changed the whole narrative. Now, I'm hitting a cop. When did that become okay?
I'm not saying hitting the cop was okay, but I'm saying we're talking about the 30, 35, 40 minutes before all of that happened.
Right.
The way that stop took place, the way that they questioned him.
It wasn't a stop.
It wasn't even a stop.
Okay, so it wasn't the cop racially profiled this man. He was in the drive-thru, fell asleep. Somebody called, hey, there's a guy asleep in the drive-thru.
And he's blocking the drive-thru.
Okay, but he wasn't driving. How do you get a DUI and you're not driving?
Oh, you get a DUI. Be in the back seat, you're still getting a DUI.
Well, it depends on what state you're in.
California is DUI.
No, in California, if you're behind the steering wheel in a stopped car, you can get a DUI. Anywhere. So if you're sleeping it off, you got to make sure you're sitting in the passenger seat.
You'll get a DUI.
But he was
in California. You'll get a DUI if you're in the back. If you have control of the keys, it doesn't matter where you're.
Okay, but if you don't have the keys,
well, you better throw them away somewhere.
But my point is, the guy was in a private parking lot and he wasn't driving.
But he was in the drive-thru ordering food. That's where he found
the car wasn't moving. Okay, but we're talking about DUI means you're driving your car under the influence. What's the D in DUI stand for?
It
driving under the influence. Was Rashard Brooks driving?
Yeah, he was driving.
No, he was not. He was not driving. The only time he drove was when the cop told him to pull your car over to the parking spot.
See, but that right there.
I'm telling you, this is going to go to court, and the cops are going to end up paying the city of Atlanta is going to pay a lot of money.
They're going to pay. Yeah, but is that cop gonna get charged? What did he? I think
the cop. One of the cops
charged for murder.
Capital
murder.
If I couldn't be a cop, Gil could not be a cop because if I got a gun, somebody shoots at me with a taser.
You're too short.
I'm busting you. I mean, straight up, if somebody shoots at me with a taser, especially if it's my taser, I'm gonna bust you.
Okay, but we're talking about training that cops should have. There should be de-escalating training. Just because a guy has possession of your taser, and before this incident, tasers were not lethal weapons. Now all of a sudden they're lethal weapons.
Okay, wait. There's a difference. There's a lethal weapon when it's hitting a certain part of the body, but it's hitting in the head. it can be fatal.
Yeah.
Okay? He shot towards the cop's head, just above the cop's head. So it could have been fatal. And if he would have hit him, say he would have hit him, who's to say he didn't turn around and grab the cop's gun after he shot him?
I mean, now we're talking about hypotheticals.
Right.
But hypothetical isn't this guy socked the cop, dude? This guy got aggressive. Okay, started hitting the cops. I don't understand.
So does that mean we got to kill Rashard Brooks? Basically, you're saying Rashard Brooks must have died. He had to die.
No, I'm saying Rashard Brooks put himself in a position that got him killed. By hitting that cop, not by being the DUI, not by pulling over. The second Rashard Brooks hit that officer, started going for the guns, this thing happened like
wait.
he put himself in that position to get killed. Yes.
He wasn't going for the gun. He grabbed the taser that was in the officer's hand.
Right.
Okay, you said he was grabbing for the gun.
But I say it could be lethal with shot in the right spot.
If somebody is trying to taser you, instinctively you're going to try to stop the taser by grabbing it.
Okay, but distinctly you're not going to turn around and shoot at the cop with it either. That's not distinctively.
But it wasn't that. We keep forgetting. He socked the cop.
Okay, right? Punching a police officer in the face, does that mean you should? I was just telling my sons a story on my way here where my uncle actually had a physical fight with an NYPD officer and knocked him out. And this is in the 50s. This is during a period where you fought cops.
Right.
In the 50s, I think things started to change in the 60s and 70s. So if you got into an altercation with a cop and you guys wanted to really fight, the cop will take his stuff off and give it to his partner and will squabble up with you.
Okay, but he didn't get shot for hitting the cop. He got shot because he shot the taser at his head.
I know, but Gil is saying once you start punching the cop, then everything...
No, you have escalated this thing to a whole different ballgame.
But shouldn't we train cops to learn how to take a couple of punches? We've all taken punches out here. We've all taken punches out here.
I can't take a punch and get away with it.
I mean, it's like if you punch a cop, boom, the punishment is death, you know?
I don't know where everybody's at from, but I'm going to tell you right now. In North Hollywood, you punch a cop, you go after his taser, 90% chance you're going to get shot.
In today's climate, for sure.
No,
yeah.
It's always been that. I think.
No, it hasn't always been like that.
The rules of engagement haven't changed, and all of a sudden it's like, we got to change the rules of engagement, dude. 30 minutes.
No.
Starts hitting the cops. What do you think's going to happen?
In the 50s and 60s, you used to be able to fight a cop. I used to get stories from my dad and uncles all the time.
Yeah, but in the 50s and 60s, you were a boy and I was a spick.
I wasn't even born.
No, that's what I'm saying. But our kind of people we were nothing in the 50s and 60s. So you can't compare that to today's day. But let's take it to another one. It's Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor was the African American woman. What city was it in?
Louisville, Kentucky.
There you go, in Kentucky. That the cops went over there, and she was shot and killed. I think the narrative is that she had nothing to do with it. That she was assassinated in her apartment. Mm-hmm. And the media won't show a lot of the stuff that happened, that transpired in that case. It wasn't no knock warrant. They did knock. You don't know that they knocked. You don't know that they knocked. The grand jury relied on one witness that said that they identified themselves. Mm-hmm. How many witnesses also said that they couldn't say anything?
Before we even get into that,
wait, it's an important point.
Before you guys even get in, understand that warrant was not for Breonna Taylor. Right. It wasn't. No.
It was for the address.
The address.
Yeah.
It was not for her. She wasn't accused of anything illegal.
But real quickly,
that's the first thing.
You're
that's
right.
the first thing you have to understand.
You're wrong.
One witness said they knocked. How many witnesses said they didn't hear the cops say anything?
A few.
10 witnesses. So in a court of law, you got 10 people saying my son Nicholas did it, but you got one person saying Miguel did it. Who do you believe?
You got two people.
I think Miguel did it. He looks like he up to no good.
You got two people that said they heard.
Well, according to the Kentucky AG, Daniel Cameron, he said they had one witness.
The shooter said he heard a knock. He just didn't hear clues. The guy, her boyfriend, who shot the first time. That's nothing.
Okay, show me a video where the cop, where Mr. Kenneth. What's his name? Kenneth Walker.
No. In the transcripts of the grand jury, it says there.
I don't trust that. This is all being manipulated.
He said it himself, the guy.
Okay, Kenneth Walker, the guy. The
shooter said it. Yeah,
I have never seen a video of Kenneth Walker saying that he heard the cops identify themselves.
So we'll agree to disagree.
No, it's not about agreeing to disagree. No, what is the evidence?
The evidence is on paper. As soon as the thing happened, he said, "Hey, I heard a knock. I didn't hear anybody say. I shot one time." And if
no, he didn't hear a knock. He heard they're banging. Okay. They're breaching the door, Gil. When you hear, so there's a difference between a knock and you hear someone pounding the door to break it down.
I want to say that we're out there for 10 or 15 minutes, knocking, and the next one finally knock the door down.
Oh,
now let's get back to the whole part of the trial. It was not even a trial. What happened, right? This is as far as I know. I'm sure you know some other stuff, and I would love to hear it. She was on warrant. The house was on the warrant. They have her on phone calls in the county jail after her first boyfriend got busted. Her pretty much saying, "Hey, go to the trap and grab this money for me." So to me, it was almost like Breonna Taylor was like, "You got guys in prison," and she was kind of mulling for the guy. And they have, and then in her car that she rented, they found a dead body in her car from one of her boys. So all this stuff, it wasn't like, did she deserve? No, of course not. But let's look at the whole thing that really happened. She's involved with her old man who's slanging dope. They find a dead body in the car that she rented, and they have her on phone talking about go to the trap house, pick up the money.
Yeah, but the fact is, the warrant was not for her. It was just for the resident.
And first of all, you're accepting.
I'm not agreeing with you or him. I'm just saying there was a warrant that just for the specific property, not because of her.
Here's the problem with these cases. In the beginning of these cases, there's all this evidence, like you just laid out, these Breonna quote unquote facts. Once I go to trial on a case, we start to find out, okay, fact number one, that's a lie. That we don't got to worry about that one. Oh, fact number. In some cases, we end up finding out all these facts. None of them are true.
Right.
So you're treating these facts about Breonna as like they're in stone. And we don't even know that.
But at the same time...
And now we find out the Attorney General, what's his name, Daniel Cameron?
Brother.
This guy is a liar now. This guy's trying to suppress the information that took place in that grand jury so that we don't hear about it. Because he knows that he manipulated the presentation. Yeah. Because in the state of, he filed a motion to suppress.
Okay, but how do you know that what you're hearing and your conspiracy with it, how do you know that's
because a juror, one of the grand jurors, saw his press conference and said he's full of shit. We need that. We need this information to be public. So what did Daniel Cameron do? File a motion to suppress that. I don't want that to become public. Why? Because his whole press conference will end up becoming a lie. He manipulated the presentation to that grand jury so that they would have a particular outcome. And we all know this because one grand juror actually filed a motion to make this public. So we don't even know all the facts, but I can tell you this, Gil. A lot of these facts about Breonna, they're not true. And one that we do know for a fact is, Breonna was getting mail sent to her house. Drugs were being shipped to her house. Police officer wrote that on the warrant. Well, how did you know that, officer? Well, I spoke to the post office and they verified these deliveries. So guess what? None of that is true. The USPS has denied that they ever verified to the police department in Louisville or to that judge that signed the warrant that Breonna ever received packages. So when we see that one lie, Gil, how many of these other things are lies too?
I get that, but let's at least put the facts out there. Did they have a warrant for her home?
They had a no-knock warrant for her home.
Yes.
Yeah. So when the first thing came out, they said that they had the wrong house. They completely the wrong apartment, and it was a narrative that got spewed out there, and it just got worse.
That's the media. That's the media, and they do that for every case.
But the media,
that happens in every case.
But a lot of people run with it, brother. They run with it as the truth, and just like how the DA and all, they're full of it. They're trying to cover their asses.
It'll take a year before all the truth comes out. But the media does that with every case. I don't even trip on that anymore because if you and I get arrested for something, the first story that the LA Times covers, it's going to have about 30% lies. That's just the way it is.
I'm more like 70%.
Maybe 70%. There's always going to be lies and misinformation in the initial stories. And the reason is because they're all competing to get the story out there. So even in this short time, when did that happen? How many months ago did this happen?
No, the shooting actually happened, I think, last year or something.
Was that, I thought that was early 2020?
No, it was early 2020.
Yeah, so let's just say it's 6 months have passed. Right. And in these 6 months, we've learned quite a few things. Some things that we learned that aren't true. So I know you want to beat up the media, but that's just the name of the game.
Yeah,
man.
But then the media pretty much controls everybody else's narrative. You got people thinking...
Because we're the media, too.
Yeah.
And if you notice, when I did the Gangster Chronicles, how did I start the next episode? Every time I did the next episode, how did I start it off with? A fact check of the things I said in the previous episode. Some things I got the wrong year on this or this information. I always corrected myself in the next episode because we're not perfect. We're always going to make mistakes. Well, you were just saying that you didn't like the narrative that the media put out there. And you're right. The media got a bunch of things wrong. Was she laying in her bed? We don't know. But that's probably not true.
Well, if I'm her boyfriend at the time who shot the weapon one time, right? And I'm thinking somebody's breaking into my house. Why am I only going to shoot once?
Yeah, that's weird.
I think he shot it. Like, oh shit, the cops. That's when you kind of figured it out. It's the cops, and that's why the cops shot back because they got fired.
Hey, shooting is a very personal thing. When you pull that trigger, sometimes you're going to let off a whole bunch. Sometimes you're going to just pop off one or two. I can't critique Mr. Walker for just busting one time because it's a very personal thing.
Did they have cameras? Did the cops have cameras when they walked into the thing?
No cameras anywhere on anything.
No body cameras, unfortunately. But I don't blame Kenneth Walker for doing what he did, and I really don't believe that they announced themselves and they knocked. I believe they had if you have a no-knock warrant, why are you knocking? Right. There's no need to knock. You think the police are going to give up any power when they have a judge that says you got the power to just bulldoze that door and go right in? Oh, but we just decided not to do that. We decided to just knock and stay outside for 15 minutes. You believe that? You really believe that, Gil?
No, I don't believe all that. But
cops are just as crooked as anybody else.
This is how I have a problem with the 3 cops. I think only one got charged for like shooting into one of the apartments somewhere. I think those cops themselves, it's hard to charge those guys and blame it on them because and I may be wrong. Maybe those guys were part of the investigation because to me it's like we go into a room. These are the officers. I'm sorry, guys. We're going to a dope. As far as the cops know, they're going in there. We're going to a dope house. This is a known stash house. This is this. This is that. So they're going in there already thinking this is some kind of dope house. They're not thinking about Brianna's in there. No, they're not. They're going in there thinking I'm serving a warrant for a dope case. If anybody should get charged or fired, it should be the detectives that pushed that agenda.
I agree with you because the guy that got the warrant wasn't one of the cops that was there during the breach. The one that lied to the judge about the packages being mailed, he wasn't one of the 3 cops. We're not even talking about that guy. I think his name is Joshua.
That guy should be charged.
Yeah, I mean, lying on a warrant to get a judge to sign it should be a felony. It probably is a felony.
Yeah. So I'm saying that's when I say he should be looking at the time that he tried to put on him.
Manslaughter or something.
Yeah.
He should be looking at that time that he's trying to get him.
But then you have these 3 cops that are acting off of what this other cop is quote unquote investigating. Yes. And I mean, it's a tough case because I understand it's hard to prosecute those 3 cops for killing Brianna. I understand that because they returned fire.
Yeah.
They returned fire. But those 3 cops should have never been there in the first place. But that warrant was signed under false pretenses. So that should be some sort of negligent homicide, some lower manslaughter.
Involuntary manslaughter or something. And you caused her death.
You caused her death.
With that, I agree.
And Attorney General Daniel Cameron did not present all the possibilities to that grand jury. And we're going to start finding out in the next few weeks what actually happened in that room privately.
Right. Yeah, I think they're going to release all the recordings and everything, right?
Yeah, I think they already released one of the audios of what happened there. So
how about...
Should we take a break, though?
Are you tired, old man?
Dude, look at aren't you getting hot? I know he's getting hot. I can see it.
Oh, you got a plan, so baby, what's the movement? Oh, you got your people, speak on it, it's time to prove it. Prove it, prove it, it's time to prove it. Prove it, prove it, before we lose it. Oh, you got a plan, so baby, what's the movement? Oh, you got your people, speak on it, it's time to prove it. Prove it, prove it, it's time to prove it. Prove it, prove it, before we lose it. Oh, you got a plan, so baby, what's the movement? Oh, you about your people, speak on it, it's time to prove it. Protesting riots, our people about to lose it. Emiliano Zapata runs deep up in my music. Revolutionaries, incarnate when I rap. Pancho Villa featuring Guevara on the track.
Yeah, so that's what I think. I think we should definitely have a third option as far as parties go. So let's take that conversation there. What do you think? Democrat, Republican?
Neither. I don't care how many people think that you got to side with one of these parties, but I really don't put too much, emphasis or support in national politics. It's important, yes, it is, but in my everyday life and on most of our everyday lives, who's on the Supreme Court really doesn't matter to me. I don't care if the Supreme Court is 6-3 conservative, 5-4 conservative, 5-4 liberal. Everyone gets their turn. If you notice in politics, you're going to have Republicans winning, and then you're going to have a Democrat winning. And then they're going to go back to Republicans, and it's going to come back to Democrats. Whether it's the presidency, or whether it's the Senate, whether it's Congress, they all take turns. And I also don't think that we should even be trying to influence the outcome because I think a lot of this is prophesied. A lot of what's going on in our American government is prophesied. Maybe Trump is supposed to be the president. Maybe this is answering some biblical prophecy that we don't understand. So I just let the chips fall where they may, and I just deal with life as it comes.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't know that most of these politicians, it's like a WWE show, bro. In front of the cameras, they're fighting one another, they hate one another, but then once the cameras are off, they're inviting each other to their weddings and everything else.
It's crazy. I'm kind of very surprised that the two candidates are 74 and 77 years old. I don't think that's ever happened in the history of American politics where both the candidates are in their 70s. In fact, I don't think we've ever had a candidate in their 70s because I think when Trump is the oldest president we've ever had.
Is he?
Yeah. Reagan was the oldest. He was elected at 69. He had 2 terms, so he left office, 78? But I think Trump was 69, maybe, or 70 when he got elected.
70, I believe. I think he's 70.
So,
but we got the real question. How old do you think his hairpiece is? That's the real question. How old is his hairpiece?
Man, that's been his style since day one.
Hey, but isn't it funny that a lot of rappers, a lot of people loved Donald Trump before all this, and then when he became president, all of a sudden he's the worst person in the world. But you got pictures of Snoop Dogg with him. You got pictures of every single celebrity with him loving him.
They were talking about that. One of the shows other day, they were talking exactly why. They were saying that when you partied with Trump, you partied. He paid, treat you to whatever. You guys had a blast. Like, it was just a party. That's the kind of guy he was, and that's why everybody liked him. But as soon as he got in the presidency, it just everything changed. His whole thing changed. His whole demeanor. That's why those people don't like him anymore.
We learned a lot about Trump since he's been president. Like, I've been following Trump since he used to own a football team in the early 80s, USFL. But we didn't know how racially divisive he was until he got into the White House. And in my opinion, I think he's very divisive. So I think that's why he turned off a lot of people. But prior to him being president, he was bling bling, stacks of money. And hip hop loved him because he represented
hookers,
everything of greed and excess. And, that's what hip hop is all about. So he definitely was embraced by a lot of people. But I think that racial divisiveness that he brought into the White House is what turned everybody off.
Yeah, we've never seen anything like that. And people say, oh, he's not rich. He's a bigot. There's no way, and I always tell people, look at this, man. Anybody who was in their 20s and even their teens, in the 50s and the 60s, especially if you're one of all those old senators, all those congressmen, they were all racist at one point. At one point, you can't come into my restaurant, you can't use our bathroom, and these guys now are these older politicians. So when people say he's not a bigot, no, he's a bigot, and he's definitely
because that was the time you grew up in.
But that's what I'm saying. So he definitely has some kind of prejudice.
But his age doesn't excuse that. There's a lot of people in their 70s that are white that are not bigots or racist like that.
But I think the worst thing with Trump is he doesn't admit it. Other people will make all kind of excuses for him. But I think the worst thing really is that it's just the wealth that he has, and even a lot of these politicians, they don't know what's going on down here. That's why I say it doesn't really matter who's the president, because down here it's a whole different world.
And also, he's had more people from his circle indicted.
Oh yes,
in the last 3.5 years than any other president in history.
I think like 250 or something. And it's always candidates,
and everybody ignores it. Everybody's ignoring. It's like every other month there's someone getting indicted, whether they worked on his campaign.
And they ain't just getting indicted; they're going to prison.
They are,
but that's a big difference.
But
they're going to prison.
He changed the game, brother. He said fake news. Once he said fake news, anytime somebody tries to throw something out, he says fake news. It could be real as hell, but he's going to say fake news, just like his tax returns, $750 in 12 years. Jesus.
No, $750 for the last 2 years.
No, but in 12 years combined, he supposedly he only paid $750 combined in 12 years. For 10 years, he
no. Like, it's the last 2 years, 16 and 17. He paid $750 each year.
I understand.
Prior to that, he didn't pay anything for like 15 years.
Oh, exactly. In 12 years, he's only paid $750. The same math.
15.
Same math.
15.
So, what is up with you? Hey, Mr. VLAD TV, I see you banging on him all the time on...
I got your back, dog.
On Instagram, yeah.
I'm banging on him.
The American Cholo, we got your back. What's up with you and Vlad?
We'll rush that food, dog.
Well,
he'll sue us.
Initially, there's a few things that I had issue with that go back last year. The most recent thing is he misquoted the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in an interview he did with D.L. Hughley, and he corrected it. He realized he made a mistake, but he misquoted this guy tremendously. Farrakhan said to throw the stone of knowledge, but I guess he didn't listen to the whole thing, and he made it seem like Farrakhan was encouraging people to throw stones and rocks at Jews, which was not what he said at all. So he edited that part and fixed it, but he never made a statement about the retraction. He refused, based on the conversations that he's had with people that know him close, he refuses to apologize for misquoting this man, where in journalism, that's standard.
Yes.
If I misquote somebody, the next day I'm going to sit there and say, hey, my bad. I used to do it every week on the Gangster Chronicles, correcting my mistake of something that I may have said the week before. He just refuses to do it, and that's why a lot of people are on his head right now. But I had issues when he made the reparations statement in 2019, where he said that he supports reparations for black folks, maybe in the form of education, which is not the way reparations works for any other groups that have received reparations in the past. I think education, giving a free education, is the worst form of a reparation, because we can get free education. We don't need money to get education. And not everyone wants to go to college. And college is not for everyone. And people who are deserving of reparations might be 50, 60, 70 years old. The last thing they think about is education. So I felt there was an undermining of all the hard people that are trying to get reparations for the descendants of slaves. And then here's another thing. I interviewed him on the Gangster Chronicles back in 2019. And I asked him a question about paying people for interviews.
Right.
And as a journalist, it's something that I don't support. And it's just not a good model for getting people to come tell their stories sincerely and honestly. And he had denied in a previous interview in 2018, he denied that he ever paid. But then he was on my platform, and I knew for a fact he paid Keefe D. Now, Keefe D is the guy that was in the car with Orlando Anderson and a couple other guys when Tupac got killed. Right. I knew Keefe D, and I had spoke to Keefe D. I had a relationship with Keefe D. So I knew for a fact he paid Keefe D. So when he came on the Gangster Chronicles, and he knew that I knew Keefe D.
Right.
So he didn't deny that he paid him, but he did say that they had made an arrangement. So I pressed him a little bit more about, let's speak on this, because this is something that's important. We need to know that you're paying someone for an interview. And he didn't want to go further at it. And I moved on. He didn't want to talk about it anymore, and then I moved on. Then he does an interview maybe 6 months later on Adam 22 on the No Jumper. And he says, oh, yeah, I pay for interviews. He says it like it's no big deal. Right. Like it's no big deal. He says, yeah, if I didn't pay for some of these interviews, you wouldn't get them. So then I'm like, okay, now you're clearly admitting you pay for them. And here's the problem I have with it. He could easily afford to do that. When you have 4 million followers and you're getting, $200,000 a month in AdSense, you can throw $2,000 at someone. That's his, believe it was what he was paying. That was his max, $2,000. But the problem with that is, whenever you give someone money for an interview, you really don't know if you can trust that interview. Right. You don't know if you can trust the information that person's saying. Not to say that everyone that gets paid will lie, but now there's an obligation. If you gave me $2,000 to sit here and talk, I'm gonna be compelled to really give you some. Correct. I might put extras on my answers. Correct. And if you look at some of his interviews, the Keefe D one, for example, there's so much BS in that interview. There's so much misinformation in that interview. And I would say it's partly because you paid the man and you didn't do anything to let the listener and the viewer know what was correct or what was incorrect. He just let it be. And then I was surprised that he actually said, he was asking an interview, what's one of your favorite interviews? And he said it was the Keefe D interview. And I think the Keefe D interview was one of the worst interviews. I don't know if you read his book, but I got an advanced copy of Keefe D's book because the co-author wanted me to write like a little intro on the book. Okay. So I said, well, send me over the book first. Let me read it. So I read the book, and there's a part in the book where Keefe D says when they pulled up on Tupac and Suge, Tupac was reaching for a gun. so he can justify why they shot and killed Pac.
Right.
And I'm like, wait up, let me read this again. I said, in 20-something years, no one ever put a gun or said that Tupac was reaching when that car pulled up. And now all of a sudden, that's the narrative. And Vlad let him get away with that narrative in the interview. And it's just a lie. And I think he's doing that to protect himself from future indictment, because even though a lot of people think that Keefe D got immunity.
Right, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Say all this.
Well, he got immunity from the LAPD under an interview that he gave with Greg Kading. But that doesn't cover Nevada, where the homicide took place.
Right.
You know, Keefe D was looking at other charges in the city of LA when Greg Kading had pressed him and said, we want to know about the Biggie killing. And Greg Kading is another person I interviewed on the Gangster Chronicles a couple months after. But Greg Kading's immunity and anything that they offered him in Los Angeles does not transfer to Las Vegas, nor does it transfer to the feds. If the feds want to indict Keefe D.
Do you think they'll ever bring charges on anybody for that thing? Or I think they kind of just let it lie and that's it.
Hey, they just indicted Little Doc Thong from East Coast Crib for a homicide that happened 17 years ago. What's the statute of limitations on homicide?
There is none.
There is none. So you think I'm just going to say, they'll probably never indict Keefe D?
They're just buying their time for something.
I don't know, but I would never say it's never going to happen. He's the only survivor of the 4 people in the car, so if anyone's going to get indicted, it would be him. Will the feds do it? I don't know.
Maybe if he starts making peace like Doc, they will.
But you know, Vlad, he's the one that he was on BG Knockout. BG Knockout was on his thing when he said that Southsiders are rats, that we had permission to rat. He should have never let something like that come out, knowing that's not true.
Well,
you know what I mean?
That's when they say the guy's a culture vulture. He likes to, that could
instigate.
He likes to instigate
Start a
fights.
war.
That could easily instigate wars and stuff like that. And to a point, I think it's kind of true, because most people, Alonso would know, I'm not putting this out. I'm not going to have this guy come out and just say that all Southsiders are rats. You're making war. So I think he does it intentionally, and he's looking for the view. He's looking for the controversy.
Absolutely. It's all about money for him. It's all about views and money. It's not about the culture. It's not about education. There's no artistic value put to it. It's just all about money. That's the bottom line. That's the only thing. And I think it was talk to him. And Vlad's response to my son was, well, I'm not losing any views. I'm not losing any subscribers. My business is going good, so why should I apologize? Right. So that just means to me, you're only concerned to apologize about something only if it's going to affect your bottom dollar. Right. And if you got integrity, just apologize. And, you know, there's just so many issues with that dude. I'm not jealous of him. I'm not a hater of him. There's just things about paying for interviews messes up the whole game. Yeah. It messes up your channel, because if he paid Keefe D for an interview and you wanted to interview Keefe D, guess what Keefe D is going to say to you?
Give him that money.
I want some money. In fact, I could have had the Keefe D interview before he did it.
Right.
Keefe D asked me, can you give me some money? And I was like, I don't pay for interviews, dude. So then Reggie Wright Jr., who was my co-host on the Gangster Chronicles, he told me that he was willing to pay Keefe D the money for him to come on my platform. And I said, that's the same thing. It's not that I don't have the money to give him. I think he was asking me for $700. I said, it's not that I didn't have $700. I just don't want to pay him $700 to not only to do the interview, but plus to start bullshitting.
You taint the game.
Yeah, you taint the game.
Well, Noel G, the actor, wanted us to pay him. I was like, hey, thank you very much. Have a good day. I said, there's nothing to talk about. I'm not paying you.
No, and
I don't care what you got.
And that's the way to do it. And that's the way we have to do it. In journalism, you're not supposed to pay. There was a guy that came out of Oprah Winfrey's camp, Dr. Phil. He did an interview of Octomom. Remember when Octomom was famous?
Yeah.
Octomom was like, you're going to pay me. I'm not telling my story. So what does Dr. Phil do? He pays her. I think he paid her $200,000 for the interview. When it got out, what did Dr. Phil do? He denied it, because he understands that that's not the way the game is supposed to be played. People are still going to do it, though, but they're going to do it sneakily.
Well,
you know,
I think we changed the game on that, especially in LA, was TMZ. TMZ, I think, is notorious for paying people for their stories.
Do they?
And that's why they get the stories like this, brother. They pay.
They do. They pay for like video footage, paying for video footage is something different because you're buying it from a private person and you want to put it on your show. You might pay for that. But when they're getting interviews from people coming out of the airport, those are just on the fly. So I don't think they pay for those interviews, but they do put a lot of money out there to get the story. To get the story.
So if I know secret stuff about him, I can sell it to TMZ.
I don't think it's going to be
So that's my big gripe, because it does mess up the game for all these other platforms. Because if you got 4 million subscribers and someone else only has 100,000, there's no way to compete.
Right.
It's just like being against monopolies. We don't allow monopolies to happen in this country because it creates an unfair level playing field for competition. When he could afford to pay everyone $2,000 or $1,000 or $2,000 or $1,000, he's going to displace all of us out the game. And he's doing it by violating a basic journalistic principle.
You know what? With Keefe D, what's amazing to me, and it's both, and I'm not going to beat the dead horse with Biggie and Tupac, but like those cops, they got arrested a few weeks after shooting them, right? You're in Las Vegas. They shot Tupac in Vegas with all those cameras, and they couldn't make any arrests. It still kind of baffles me.
Well, I spoke to Greg Kading about this, the LAPD that was detecting, that was investigating Biggie. He said in '96 in Vegas, you didn't have as many cameras as you might think they would have had. It wasn't like it is now. 96 was 24 years ago.
Yeah.
So there wasn't as many cameras, and that's Las Vegas's fault. Las Vegas didn't want to investigate it. They didn't want all that drama to their city.
But they'll buzz OJ. They'll buzz OJ and break them off.
It's actually been, is it the 25th anniversary of OJ?
Yes, it was. It was actually, because I just interviewed Carl Douglas.
That's right.
And we spoke about this. He said it's the 25th anniversary of the acquittal.
Guilty or not guilty?
Hey, they found him not guilty. And I think that's one of these cases that we'll never know the truth. I paid attention very closely to that trial. F. Lee Bailey proved there was 2 sets of footprints in that blood. But only one man was charged, O.J. Simpson.
Well, they said his buddy may have been the other one.
A.C. Cowlings. I have another theory. I remember my father told me this. Vincent Alonso, rest in peace. He told me O.J.'s son did that. Jason.
Oh, his other one, yeah.
He said his son did that. And my father went on into a whole, detail of why he thinks the son did it.
I got it on my own theory.
What's that?
6'9".
Yeah, 6'9".
It was 6'9".
I personally, back then, I remember watching the trial, and I was busted when I was watching the trial. I was going for OJ. I really was. I still to this day, I think OJ did it. I did, but I think at the time, the temperament of the country was, especially when you were in the ghetto, you're in the hood, we're going to finally win one. And I was one of those young guys. I was saying, I don't give a shit if OJ is guilty. I wanted a not guilty plea, and it was amazing how back then you had 2 different colleges. You had black college, you had a white college, and they were showing them lifetime when they said not guilty.
Yeah.
The black college jumped up and was cheering. And I was with them at the time, and the white colleges were just, they couldn't believe it. But I think the OJ thing kind of brought the light of how injustice it is in America unless you got money or something.
Well, it actually exposed the racism within the LAPD when Mark Furman testified. I mean, this guy was a known racist. And since the O.J. Simpson verdict, I have met retired LAPD officers and other cops that knew, like, Furman was well known. In fact, a cop actually told me that it might have been Furman that gave the Wilshire Division of the LAPD the nickname Nigger Division.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, they called it Nigger Division because apparently if you were black and you came out of the academy in the 70s, you wanted to go where other blacks were, and Wilshire was where blacks. So if he was a new recruit and he was like, I want to go work in Wilshire Division, so they called it Nigger Division within the police.
Right,
within.
Of course.
So a lot of us didn't know that until that O.J. Simpson trial when Johnny Cochran was able to expose Mark Furman for using this word, and he probably used the word like on a daily basis.
Of course. Always if it don't fit, you must have quit, man. And he wanted it. So. Did you do an interview with his attorney? Carl Douglas was one of the lawyers on the Dream Team. He worked under Johnny Cochran when Johnny was making a name for himself. Johnny came on the scene in the 70s. He goes all the way back to the Geronimo Pratt case back in 71 when they charged him with a murder that apparently he didn't do. It wasn't even in L.A. at the time. And it took him until 1997 for Johnny Cochran to get him out. But throughout the 70s and the 80s, he was making a name for himself. And then Carl Douglas graduated
from law school, started working. He worked for the Federal Public Defender and then got a job with Johnny Cochran in 1986. So he worked with Johnny Cochran from 1986 to 1998 for 12 years. And now Carl Douglas is one of the top civil rights attorneys. He sues the police, and he's won probably more judgments, dollar amounts, than any other attorney in the history of America, if I have that correct. Someone might be able to fact check me on that. But I think if you total up all of Carl Douglas's settlement wins, it's more than any other attorney has won.
Wow. There was I don't know if it was a rumor, but they said Shapiro stepped down because he thought OJ was guilty. Have you ever heard that one?
I will say you're going to have to wait for the Carl Douglas interview, which will be coming out on Street TV, because Carl Douglas gives us some Robert Shapiro stories. So I think we might actually touch on that. So I don't want to answer that just yet.
Yeah, there was something about OJ whispering something to Shapiro or something.
Well, I think a lot of us
like that.
saw the FX series, right?
Yeah.
The show.
I think
So I will tell you this: Carl Douglas did say that they used a lot of creative license in the TV show, and they added some things that didn't happen. Sure. So we talk about that in the interview.
Did they talk about 6ix9ine in it?
I couldn't watch it because they just put the Kardashians in there way too much. So I was like, come on, man. You guys, they went from a good, solid show, and they started throwing Kardashians in there, and that's when I stopped watching it. I got a question for you.
You've been asking a lot of questions.
You talked about the reparations. I'll be completely honest with you. I haven't had anybody sway me yet. I am against it, but when I say I'm against it, it doesn't mean screw you guys. I heard you come up with different things that they can do. Because when I hear reparations, I hear everybody. And I'm like,
well, the first thing, but you got to find out if he's even for it.
Yeah, he is. If you listen to the interview, you would listen.
Well, yeah, my Vlad response.
Yeah. I just, as a taxpayer myself now, I hear that, especially in California, they got a committee going. The guy Newsom's going to look into it. And as a guy from California, I'm like, dude, my tax is already too high, and that's going to be more money I got to pay. Who do you think should qualify for reparations, and what do you believe the reparations should be?
Well, they already have different organizations that have tallied up financial amounts that it should be. And I'm going to leave that in the hands of those people. But it's going to be a lot of money. And the people that are entitled to it is anyone that is a descendant of a slave that bled, sweated, built this country.
That's going to be every black man from here to Mississippi.
That's not true. Not everyone is a descendant of slaves that are black in this country.
Would you say you're a descendant?
I'm not a descendant of any American slave, but I'm a descendant of a slave from... I actually traced my roots to a slave named Julian Alonso, where I get my name from, and he was a slave on the island of Curacao. So the Dutch would owe me some money if I ever decided to do it. And here's the thing. All these other slave countries have given reparations, from England to... from Holland, the Netherlands. But America's never done it. But we've given money to different Native American tribes. We've given money to the Japanese for interning them during World War II. We've given money to the Jews. The United States has given money to the Jews, and they weren't even part of the Holocaust.
Okay, but...
And we're talking about millions of dollars. Millions.
I'll tell you from experience, they have not given major money to the majority of Native Americans. I will tell you that right now, because I got an Indian number. They allowed Native Americans to open up
casinos.
Because
that's a reparation.
That's on federal law. No, that's on federal.
Well, they just got hit to the game and said,
that's not federal property.
Having a casino is huge.
But what about Hispanics? Shouldn't they be getting reparations before anybody else?
I believe that the Latinos that are from the southwest of this part of this country deserve reparations as a result of the Mexican-American War of 1848, because all of this land was taken in an unlawful war.
So shouldn't they be getting reparations before any other race?
I don't know if it's before. I mean, that was the war.
Why? Because the slavery wasn't around when this happened.
Yes, the slavery goes back to the 1600s.
I know, but
U.S.
The actual before this became the United States, this was all Mexican land.
No, so it was not. There was no such thing as Mexico in 1600.
They just found in Georgia. As what is the time of the pyramid? What kind of pyramid?
Mayan period or something?
Yeah, Mayan period. A Mayan. pyramid.
Yeah, this was all
So this is
Mayans.
yes.
And then go south, you had Aztecs and then Mayans. And then you had some Apaches in the northern part of Mexico where Arizona's at.
So when this was all Mexico,
But it was
before
never
the United
Mexico.
States took it,
It was never Mexico.
you don't think this was all Mexico? This is all this property. This is the land they pay something like $500 or something. For
In
this whole
1600, there was no Mexico on the map.
In 1600, yeah, there was no Mexico.
1609, slaves started coming here. 1609.
Okay.
We had 13 colonies already, from Georgia all the way to Delaware, New York, New Jersey, the Carolinas.
You're a few hundred years old. The Spanish came.
No, I'm just asking.
No,
you know what I mean?
what you're trying to say is what was Mexico was California, New Mexico, Texas. Going that and should there be reparations? Like he said, yes. I think. I just don't think there's.
But here's the problem with the reparations.
Yeah.
During the 1840, after the war, the Mexican-American War, even though a lot of people say the United States took this land, they actually gave $15 million to the government of Mexico in 1852 or 3. $15 million at that time, I don't know what that would be today, but that's a lot of money. So a lot of people argue, no. America already gave the Mexican government $15 million after they took California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. So it's kind of hard to argue, but we can go back and say, was that a good deal?
No, of course.
Was that a good deal as a result of a war? And that war was actually because of slavery.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying it to Mexico, but I'm saying for the Hispanic people.
No,
The people that were, you know what I mean? I think
It's hard to have reparations for people that immigrated here, if that's what I'm
Well,
understanding.
we weren't immigrated here. We were already here.
No, like you, for instance, your generation over here. There's a lot of people from Texas that are generational. They never were from. In other words, those guys literally the border crossed in.
Here's the thing, though. When Mexico actually did have the country borders, there were very few people that were living in the northern part of which is now the United States. The population of the people in Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, and Southern California was so low. But here's crazy. I looked at this. It's called the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty.
Okay.
They were in Washington, D.C. debating where this border should be. There were those in Washington, D.C. saying we should take it all the way down to Mexico, where Mexico City is. They wanted to go that far south. And they were arguing in Congress where this border should be. And they finally agreed the Rio Grande, and then they eventually created this border. And the reason why they picked that border is because it had the least amount of people that were from Mexico living there. So it wouldn't impact the population of Mexico because there weren't even a lot of people on that side.
How about when people say, and I kind of agree with it, they say there was never, like California especially, there was never any legal slavery in California, yet California wants to be the first state to pay out some money.
You're right, but I agree with that. You know why? There were runaway slaves that left Louisiana, that left Texas, that left Mississippi and came to California. And guess how they got treated? Even though California was a free slave state, they sent the slaves back in some instances. It wasn't until we get to a case, Biddy Mason, who was a slave from Mississippi. She came to California with a slave owner. Because the slave owner brought her here and she wasn't a runaway slave, she was granted her freedom. But the California courts were not always kind to runaway slaves. So that's the justification for reparations coming out of the state of California, because they screwed some of the slaves through the court system.
So you really believe, or you really feel that something you did years ago, okay, say you, and goes farther down, way down your kids, your kids, and fought, that they should get something because you went through something?
Because you're a descendant of it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
You really?
Absolutely.
Why is that? I don't understand that.
Because our identity is shaped by our history. Everything is related. I can directly tie my life to my great-grandfather and how he treated his grandfather, because that's directly related to who? My dad. I can go back 4 generations and tell you how that my great-grandfather has had an influence on my life. So how far can we go back? If we're talking about slavery, we're talking about murder, we're talking about abuse and free labor, that's have to have an impact on those people, their kids, their grandkids, and their great-grandkids.
Because I can't identify with my great-grandfather, and his tribe got wiped out.
No, but I'm saying your great-grandfather had an impact on your grandfather.
Okay.
And your grandfather shaped your dad.
All right.
So I could actually go to specific things that my great grandfather did just because I do the research and I learned about him. But even if you don't even know who that person is, you can't deny the impact that your descendants have on your present.
But I can. Because my father became a gang member, came off the reservation, became a gang member in East Los Angeles, went to prison, did all his bit. My grandfather, his father, was somebody that a stand-up, Indian that started the tribe, and his father was the same way. You know what I mean? So they're whole different things, but they got killed, get captured or whatever back in the days when they were fighting for this country. So I can't understand, I can't identify with them.
And it's just not.
And to get paid for it?
Well, let me give you another good example where it's bigger than just who our descendants are. It's the practices and policies that were in place when our descendants were living. So, for example, South LA, in 2020, the ghetto of South LA was shaped by housing practices that were established in the 1890s. So these housing practices in the 1890s, which restricted people of color from living in certain areas, only left this area for them to move to. Now, those housing practices became illegal in 1848 in the Shelley versus Kramer decision. But by 1948. But by 1948, the ghetto is already firmly established, and the 2020 ghetto is a direct extension of what was going on in 1948. So we have 100 years of the shaping of this ghetto that was purely defined by what was being practiced into law over 100 years ago.
Okay, now that white in 48, that black in 48, or wasn't a lot of white in South Central?
No, in 1948, it was becoming black, but there was a ruling.
White flight and everybody started leaving.
No, white flight came right after. In 1948, the Shelley versus Kramer decision made restrictive covenants illegal. Because back then, and this was all going on through the whole country. For example, the black community was confined by Slauson Avenue to the south, and Washington to the north, and Broadway to the west, and Alameda to the east. You couldn't live outside of that box. If you tried to get a house or an apartment, there was a covenant on it. Only a white person could move there, and that was legal up from the 1890s. They wrote it into law around 1910. And it shaped that ghetto all the way up until 1848. Then when you get to 1949 and 1950, you start to see blacks moving on the other side of Slauson, moving west.
So were Mexicans or Hispanics, and I don't know the answer to this, were they slaves here in the United States?
They weren't slaves. They were second-class citizens, that's for sure.
Okay, they were second-class citizens.
And they were under the restrictive covenants, too, because the restrictive covenants were against all non-whites.
Okay, no, I understand that. But I'm saying... Okay, so we're in the same predicament as the Hispanics.
In terms of what?
Right.
In terms of
as far as our ghettos and
a lot of racial
everything.
Stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels in terms of the housing practices and the shaping of the ghettos, and how it's no coincidence that Boyle Heights is designed the way it is with the Mexican Americans and Mexican immigrants moving there, because that was the settlement place where they were restricted to, let's say, at the turn of the 20th century, around the early 1900s.
I thought it was all Jews in Oriental.
It was Jews, but at that time, guess where did the Jews go then? They left for the west side. Yeah. They went to Fairfax. Yeah. So all of that was Jewish in the now you're going further back when it was Jewish and Italian. We're talking about 1880, 1890. But then by the time you get to 1900, 1910, you have Mexicans coming in there, and slowly the Jews start moving out. Okay, so that still tells me the Hispanic community should be getting reparations. I agree that the Hispanic... You know what I mean? I don't think it should just be a black thing. If they're going to get reparations, it should be to Hispanics too. There's a lot of discrimination that the Hispanics endured in L.A., but the reparations that we're specifically talking about is the descendants of slaves. Okay, but we are not descendants of slaves, but we're in the same position that the black community is in now. I would disagree with the same position. There are the same communities, the same ghettos, the same kind of structural problems, right? Yeah, but the blacks have a longer history in these ghettos under these conditions than Mexicans and Mexican Americans do. So it's a time thing. It's been centuries.
To a point, yes and no. Like with me, I come from Honduras, man. I come from a third world country. I remember being a third world country, and I can tell you that a guy in the hood in South Central that thinks he's living in the worst condition in the world got a flat screen TV, got some nice Jordans, got some nice rims in his car, and he's thinking he's at the bottom of the barrel. Go to Honduras. You're middle class, man.
I've heard of those same stories from my uncles in Puerto Rico, because I thought I lived poor when I was born in New York. And then I got to hear his poor stories, and it just kind of completely overshadows anything you've ever been through as a kid.
What I love about you, Alonso, is you come with the answers, you come with the facts, you come with the points, brother. And it was a pleasure having you come on today, man. Anything else? You can have the last word, my man.
Oh, man, I appreciate it, man. I love supporting independent journalism. I believe that we need to support each other out here to get our platforms growing, especially platforms that contribute to our knowledge, contribute to the culture. And you're a platform that I'm going to be supporting for many years to come. And whenever you need me to come,
that's right,
I'm here.
Remember, we got your back against VLAD, dog. We'll work that for you, dog.
And let me just say that I don't have nothing. I have nothing against him as a person. I don't want people to. I'm not part of this cancel him and all of that. But I do have issues with the style of journalism that he does, because it does affect other platforms. Just imagine, Gil, if you had to pay every person that came in here to do an interview. It's not sustainable. And sometimes we have videos that are demonetized. I'm going to have this great dude that I want to interview, but then after I post the videos, because he said something that the algorithm didn't like, it gets demonetized. So even paying someone $500 or $600, it doesn't make business sense, because we can't predict whether a video is even going to help our platform grow anyways. Right. So that was my whole thing against him. I don't want anyone to think I'm hating on him. I mean, this has been a long-standing debate within journalism for years. I don't think that we should bow down to it and get to the point where that becomes the norm.
I say we rush him.
No, I just don't want that to become the norm, that, we got to pay $1,000 or $2,000. And I'm glad that the people who do pay it and get caught, they're embarrassed for it, like Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil shouldn't have paid Optomom $200,000 for an interview. That's just ridiculous.
Shout out your channel.
Street TV, also Street TV podcast. I just uploaded the first episode. Check that out. And streetgangs.com. You can find me there every day, any day.